Welcome, listeners, to the first episode of the podcast, A World of History. I'm thrilled to have you join us as we embark on a journey through time, exploring the people, events, and ideas that have shaped our shared human story. This series, brought to you by the Academy of History and Culture, is about more than recounting dates and battles. It's about uncovering the drama, brilliance, and humanity behind history's most defining moments. Today, we dive into the story of a man whose life embodies contrasts: meteoric rise and crushing fall, boundless genius, and tragic flaws. Yes, we're talking about Napoleon Bonaparte. Picture this: a man who at the age of 35 boldly crowns himself Emperor of the French, defying centuries of tradition and rewriting the very rules of power. Yet, just 16 years later, he dies alone, exiled to the rocky windswept island of St. Helena, far from the grandeur of his empire. Napoleon's life wasn't just a saga of conquest and collapse. It was a window into the forces of revolution, the power of nationalism, and the resilience of the human spirit. Today, we'll peel back the layers to reveal the man behind the legend, his unparalleled achievements, his relentless ambition, and the fatal flaws that defined his story. Let's set the stage. It's August 15th, 1769, in the modest Corsican town of Ajaccio. On this day, in a bustling household of 7 siblings, Napoleone Bonaparte is born to Carlo Buonaparte and Letizia Ramolino. Napoleon's family wasn't wealthy, but they weren't destitute either. They were part of Corsica's rising middle class, ambitious, well-connected, and fiercely proud of their heritage. At this point, Napoleon's surname reflects his Italian roots: Buonaparte. Corsica, after all, had been under Italian influence for centuries. It wasn't until much later, as a 26-year-old French general, that Napoleon gave his name a French twist, becoming the Bonaparte we know today. This small change was symbolic of a larger transformation, a life lived at the crossroads of two cultures, Italian and French, that deeply influenced his identity. Napoleon's childhood unfolded against the rugged backdrop of Corsica, an island of dramatic landscapes and even more dramatic history. This was a place shaped by conflict, resilience, and an enduring spirit of independence, qualities that would come to define Napoleon himself. To understand Napoleon, we must first understand Corsica. This Mediterranean island was a prize coveted by empires for centuries. Since 1284, it had been under Genoese rule, a period marked by exploitation and neglect. By the 18th century, Corsicans, led by the charismatic Pasquale Paoli, had had enough. In a stunning act of defiance, they expelled Genoa's governor, achieving a brief but glorious era of independence. But this freedom was short-lived. Unable to maintain control, Genoa sold Corsica to France in 1768, just a year before Napoleon's birth. The French wasted no time asserting their dominance, crushing Corsican resistance and integrating the island into their expanding empire. Napoleon's early years were steeped in this atmosphere of rebellion, resilience, and adaptation. Corsica's struggle for independence left an indelible mark on the young boy, fostering a fierce pride in his heritage while also teaching him the harsh realities of power and politics. At the center of Napoleon's formative years was his father, Carlo Bonaparte, a man who straddled the line between idealism and pragmatism. Educated at the prestigious University of Pisa, Carlo was a lawyer and a revolutionary, initially supporting Corsica's fight for freedom under Pasquale Paoli. But when the French crushed the rebellion, Carlo made a pivotal choice. He accepted their offer of amnesty and aligned himself with the new regime. This was no easy decision. For Carlo, it meant navigating the treacherous waters of loyalty and survival. By cooperating with the French, he secured a position as a magistrate and earned the favor of Count Charles-Louis de Marbeuf, the French-appointed governor of Corsica. From Carlo, young Napoleon learned 2 invaluable lessons: the power of pragmatism and the art of seizing opportunity. Carlo's ability to balance ideals with strategic alliances laid the foundation for Napoleon's own approach to leadership. Carlo's efforts positioned the Bonaparte family within Corsica's evolving social hierarchy, giving them opportunities that few others enjoyed. This included sending 9-year-old Napoleon to study in France. Imagine being a child, whisked away from the familiarity of your island home to a foreign land where you barely spoke the language. Napoleon's strong Corsican accent and unyielding pride set him apart, often making him the target of ridicule. But Napoleon wasn't one to wallow in self-pity. Instead, he used these challenges as fuel for his ambition. From his father, he inherited dreams of revolution. From his mother, Letizia, he inherited discipline, resilience, and an iron will. Corsica may have been Napoleon's starting point, but his sights were always set higher. As we'll explore in future episodes, Napoleon would go on to become one of the most transformative figures in history, a man who reshaped the world even as he wrestled with his own flaws. The Bonaparte family, though not destitute, lived a life of limited resources, caught between Corsica's turbulent political tides and their aspirations for something greater. Their determination paid off when, at just 9 years old, Napoleon left his beloved island home for mainland France, a move that would forever change his destiny. Imagine it, a young boy, fierce and determined, stepping into a new world where he couldn't even speak the language. French was foreign to him, yet mastering it became his first challenge. And master it he did, though his thick Corsican accent clung to him, setting him apart as an outsider at Brienne, the prestigious military academy in northern France. But that outsider status was no match for Napoleon's relentless drive. Napoleon's time at Brienne was a crucible of transformation. While other boys spent their time on frivolous pursuits, Napoleon buried himself in his studies, diving deep into subjects like mathematics, geography, and history. These weren't mere academic exercises, they were tools he would later wield as a military mastermind. But Napoleon's hunger for greatness wasn't just fueled by books. He idolized legendary conquerors like Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great, not as distant historical figures, but as blueprints for destiny. These men had defied the odds and shaped the world. Why couldn't he? And defy the odds he did. Brienne's rigorous curriculum was designed to take 2 years to complete, yet Napoleon's laser-focused determination allowed him to finish it in just 1. By 1785, at the age of 16, he graduated and secured the rank of second lieutenant in the artillery, a position that would become the foundation of his military genius. Just as Napoleon was beginning to carve out his future, tragedy struck. His father, Carlo Buonaparte, succumbed to illness, leaving the family in emotional and financial turmoil. At just 16, Napoleon was thrust into a role of responsibility, feeling the weight of his family's struggles. Seeking leave from his duties, he returned to Corsica to help his grieving family. What he found was heartbreaking. The family farm was in disarray, their finances in ruins, and the death of their powerful patron, Count Marbeuf, had stripped them of the protection they once relied upon. Napoleon was faced with the harsh realities of life without privilege or support. For the next 7 years, Napoleon balanced these mounting family obligations with his burgeoning ambitions in France. He remained tied to Corsica. Its rugged landscapes, its proud culture, and its struggles were etched into his identity. Yet, as events unfolded on the mainland, it became clear that Napoleon's destiny would lie elsewhere. While Napoleon shuttled between Corsica and France, the latter was heading for an earth-shaking transformation. Picture it. The opulent halls of Versailles, glittering with jewels and laughter, a stark contrast to the despair and hunger of the French people. Beneath the gilded surface, the nation simmered with unrest. By July 14, 1789, this tension exploded with the storming of the Bastille, a moment that marked the birth of the French Revolution. But the revolution wasn't a single act. It was a sweeping tide of change that promised hope while tearing the nation apart. In 1791, revolutionary fervor reached Corsica, turning the island into a hotbed of competing loyalties. For Napoleon, this was a turning point. Corsica, once a source of identity and pride, became a place of impossible contradictions. Torn between his homeland and his ambitions, Napoleon made a fateful decision. He would sever ties with Corsica and fully commit himself to the revolutionary cause in France. When Napoleon returned to France in May 1792, the revolution had reached a fever pitch. The monarchy was crumbling, and foreign rulers like Austria's Francis II were rattling sabers, fearing that revolutionary ideas might topple their thrones and possibly their heads. Within months of Napoleon's return, the French monarchy fell. In January 1793, King Louis XVI met his end at the guillotine, a moment that symbolized the triumph of liberty but also plunged France into chaos. For Napoleon, the revolution wasn't just political upheaval, it was a clarion call. He had seen the inequalities of the Ancien regime up close, and the revolution's promise of equality and meritocracy resonated deeply with him. Here was an opportunity for a man of talent to rise, not by birthright, but by ability. Napoleon threw himself wholeheartedly into the revolutionary cause. He understood that this was more than a chance to fight for ideals. It was his moment to prove himself on the stage of history. In the tempest of revolutionary France, a young Napoleon Bonaparte didn't just adapt, he thrived. His was a mind fueled by conviction and strategy, and this transformative period in history provided the perfect crucible for his talents. One of his earliest acts of brilliance came shortly after his return to France, when he wrote Dinner at Beaucaire, a fiery pamphlet that wasn't just a defense of the revolution, but a manifesto for the Republic's survival. Napoleon's words echoed with purpose, calling for stability through a robust military, a vision that didn't just resonate, it electrified revolutionary leaders. Among them was Maximilien Robespierre, who recognized in Napoleon a man of not only military skill but also unwavering belief in the Republic's ideals. This combination of intellect, passion, and capability set Napoleon apart in a time when France desperately needed heroes. The revolution was a storm threatening to engulf the nation, but for Napoleon, it was the wind that would carry him to greatness. As the old order crumbled, he positioned himself as a leader in the new world taking shape, one he was determined to define. By the fall of 1793, Napoleon's career seemed to be stagnating. He was assigned to a routine convoy mission in the Mediterranean, a task far beneath his ambitions. But fortune favors the bold, and fate soon led him to a detour that would change everything. Napoleon found himself in Le Beausset, near Toulon, where he encountered Augustin Robespierre, Maximilien's influential younger brother, and other key revolutionaries grappling with a dire crisis. Just 20 kilometers away, the city of Toulon had become a powder keg of counter-revolutionary activity. After the execution of King Louis XVI, royalists in Toulon had declared independence from the Republic, hoisted the royal flag, and gone so far as to invite the British Navy into their harbor. To revolutionary France, this was nothing short of a disaster. British forces on French soil threatened to undo everything the revolution had achieved. Napoleon seized the moment. This wasn't just a chance to fight. It was an opportunity to prove his brilliance on a national stage. When Napoleon arrived at Toulon, the situation was dire. The Revolutionary Army's attempts to retake the city through direct siege tactics were failing miserably. Morale was low, and progress was non-existent. Napoleon quickly analyzed the battlefield and saw what others had missed. The key to victory wasn't brute force, it was strategy. He proposed a daring plan that required precision and audacity. Rather than continuing futile assaults, the French should focus on capturing the high ground surrounding the city. By securing these strategic points, the Revolutionary Army could rain artillery fire on the British fleet in the harbor, forcing them to retreat and leaving the city vulnerable. Napoleon's unshakable confidence and sharp reasoning convinced General Jacques-François Dugommier, the French commander, to adopt the plan. Napoleon personally oversaw the placement of artillery batteries on the heights, ensuring every cannon was positioned for maximum impact. The results were immediate and dramatic. The relentless artillery fire overwhelmed the British fleet, forcing them to abandon Toulon. By December 1793, the city was firmly back in French hands. This victory wasn't just a military success. It was a decisive moment that reinvigorated the revolution and crushed counter-revolutionary hopes in southern France. The triumph at Toulon was a turning point, not just for revolutionary France, but for Napoleon Bonaparte. His tactical brilliance, combined with his courage under fire, earned him widespread acclaim and a rapid promotion to brigade general at just 24 years old. He was no longer just another officer. He was a rising star, a man whose ingenuity had changed the course of a critical battle. But Toulon wasn't without its costs. During the siege, Napoleon sustained a serious bayonet wound to his leg. Yet even in pain, his leadership never wavered. His resilience became part of his growing legend, endearing him to both his troops and the revolutionary leaders who saw in him the promise of a brighter future. To the people of France, Napoleon became the hero of Toulon, a symbol of revolutionary strength and ingenuity. For Napoleon himself, this victory was more than a milestone. It was the foundation of his destiny. By October 1795, Napoleon Bonaparte's meteoric rise was unstoppable. His reputation as a brilliant tactician and a savior of the revolution had already set him apart, but the next chapter of his story would elevate him to a whole new level. On October 4th, Paris was in turmoil. The city streets seethed with rebellion as a massive mob threatened to topple the revolutionary government, the Directory. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The survival of the revolution itself hung by a thread. The government's first attempt to suppress the uprising ended in humiliation. An aging general, too trusting of the rebels' false promises, withdrew his forces prematurely and paid the price. With the mob emboldened and chaos on the brink of erupting, the Directory turned to a name that had already become synonymous with decisive action: Napoleon Bonaparte, the hero of Toulon. Napoleon was handed command of the government's defenses, and he acted with speed and precision. The rebels, numbering in the thousands, advanced on the Tuileries Palace, where the Directory clung to power. For Napoleon, this wasn't just about restoring order. It was a moment to solidify his place as the defender of the revolution. With his artillery experience, Napoleon devised a ruthless strategy. He had his cannons loaded with canister shot, a devastating ammunition that scattered shrapnel over wide areas. As the mob surged closer, Napoleon gave the command to fire. The results were swift and brutal. In an instant, the streets of Paris transformed into chaos as the rebel forces were obliterated, their uprising crushed in just 2 hours. This event, known as 13 Vendémiaire, left around 400 rebels dead and delivered a powerful message. Napoleon was not just a general, he was a protector of the revolution's ideals. His swift and decisive leadership saved the Directory from collapse, and in return, they lauded him as the savior of the Republic. The triumph at Vendémiaire marked a turning point not just for the revolution, but for Napoleon himself. No longer just a brilliant strategist, he emerged as a political force. Across France, people hailed him as the man who had saved the nation from descending into anarchy. One of his most fervent supporters was Paul Barras, a senior leader of the Directory. Barras not only praised Napoleon publicly, but also ensured his rapid ascent. Just days after the uprising, Barras declared Napoleon a national hero and rewarded him with an extraordinary command of 2 field armies, a position of immense power, especially for a man still in his 20s. Napoleon's influence was expanding far beyond the battlefield. Napoleon's growing fame also brought him into the glittering circles of Parisian high society. In the city's vibrant salons, exclusive gatherings of political, social, and cultural elites, he mingled with influential figures and began to navigate the complex world of power and politics. It was at one such salon that his life took an unexpected and transformative turn. There, Napoleon met Josephine de Beauharnais, a woman who would change his life forever. Josephine was no ordinary socialite. A widow 6 years Napoleon's senior, she had survived the French Revolution's terror and emerged as a figure of charm, poise, and independence. Born to a wealthy plantation-owning family in Martinique, she was a savvy businesswoman who deftly managed political and social alliances. At the time of their meeting, Josephine was the mistress of none other than Paul Barras, Napoleon's political benefactor. Yet when Napoleon encountered her, he was immediately captivated. His letters to her revealed the depth of his passion, overflowing with longing and devotion. In one such letter, he confessed, "I wake filled with thoughts of you. Your image and the intoxicating memory of yesterday's evening have left my senses no rest. You are leaving at noon. In 3 hours I shall see you again. 1,000 kisses until then, but don't give me any. Those set my blood on fire." For Josephine, Napoleon's adoration was initially flattering, but not entirely convincing. She was accustomed to admirers and wasn't immediately swept off her feet. However, Napoleon's unrelenting persistence, combined with his growing stature, ultimately won her over. Theirs was a relationship of contrasts. Josephine, polished and worldly, had a refined elegance that dazzled the social elite. Napoleon, on the other hand, was intense, ambitious, and socially awkward, a fiery young general driven by dreams of greatness. Yet despite their differences, the two were drawn to one another in a way neither could resist. For Napoleon, Josephine represented everything he yearned for: sophistication, beauty, and a connection to the powerful Parisian elite. For Josephine, Napoleon was a rising star, a man of passion and determination, whose trajectory seemed destined to reshape history. On March 9, 1796, Napoleon married Josephine de Beauharnais in a modest civil ceremony at a Parisian mayor's office. For Napoleon, this union was deeply personal, a whirlwind romance that consumed him entirely. But the marriage also carried immense political weight. Josephine's connections to Parisian high society and her close relationship with Paul Barras, Napoleon's powerful benefactor, strengthened his ties to the revolutionary elite. The honeymoon was short-lived, literally. Just 2 days after their wedding, Napoleon left Paris to take command of the Army of Italy. Despite the physical distance, his letters to Josephine reveal the intensity of his feelings. Overflowing with passion and longing, they also provide glimpses of the fiery ambition that drove Napoleon to reshape Europe. Napoleon's rise to prominence after his triumph at Vendémiaire had already cemented his reputation as the revolution's savior. But the Italian campaign would take him from a gifted general to a figure of unprecedented political and military power. The French Revolution had sent shockwaves across Europe, striking terror into the old European monarchies. Among these shaken rulers was Emperor Francis II of Austria, whose Habsburg Empire faced the dual threat of revolutionary ideas spreading and military defeat at the hands of France. The battle for dominance converged in northern Italy, a region vital to both Austria and France. The Austrians allied with local monarchs to stem the revolutionary tide, while France sought to showcase its ideals and military strength. But the French army, gutted by revolutionary purges and plagued by low morale, seemed ill-prepared for the fight. Enter Napoleon. When Napoleon assumed command in 1796, the Army of Italy was little more than a ragtag collection of demoralized soldiers. Poorly supplied, underfed, and disillusioned, they were on the brink of collapse. Napoleon, however, saw potential where others saw failure. With his signature charisma and strategic genius, he delivered a rallying cry that electrified his troops. "Soldiers, you are starving and naked. The government owes you much, but can give you nothing. I will lead you into the most fertile plains of the world, where you will find honor, glory, and wealth." These words weren't just promises, they were a declaration of intent. Napoleon transformed his dispirited soldiers into a unified, determined force, ready to take on the might of Austria and its allies. Napoleon's first test came quickly. On April 12, 1796, at the Battle of Montenotte, he faced Austrian forces that had held the region in a stalemate for months. Napoleon shattered that deadlock with a masterclass in tactical warfare. Using rapid maneuvers, precision artillery strikes, and psychological tactics, he overwhelmed the Austrians and forced them into retreat. This victory wasn't just about the battlefield. For Napoleon's soldiers, it was proof that their young general could deliver on his promises. For the revolution, it was a moment of triumph that reignited hope and momentum. With their confidence restored and supplies replenished, Napoleon's army pressed forward, winning battle after battle as they surged through northern Italy. Napoleon's campaign in Italy wasn't just a military success. It was a strategic masterstroke that reshaped the power dynamics of Europe. By April 1797, his forces stood at the gates of Vienna, the heart of the Austrian Empire. Emperor Francis II, faced with certain defeat, had no choice but to sue for peace. The resulting Treaty of Campo Formio was nothing short of a humiliation for Austria. France gained control of Belgium and the western banks of the Rhine, while Austria ceded significant influence in northern Italy. But Napoleon didn't stop there. He demanded reparations, stripping Venice of its treasures and shipping priceless artworks, sculptures, and artifacts back to France. These cultural spoils not only enriched the French treasury, but also symbolized the revolution's dominance. Napoleon's ambitions in Italy extended beyond military conquest. He recognized the opportunity to reshape the region's political landscape, consolidating former Austrian territories into the Cisalpine Republic. Drafting its constitution and outlining its laws, Napoleon demonstrated his skill as a statesman and visionary leader. For many Italians, Napoleon was a liberator who planted the seeds of modern Italy. His efforts to unify the region laid the groundwork for a national identity that Italians would continue to build upon long after his campaign ended. By the time Napoleon returned to France, he was no longer just a general. He was a symbol of revolutionary success. His stunning victories in Italy had filled the French treasury, stabilized the economy, and elevated France's cultural and political stature. Paris became a hub of art and innovation, home to treasures Napoleon had claimed in Italy, and France's status as a European power was restored. Even his defeated enemies acknowledged his brilliance. Emperor Francis II presented Napoleon with Lepizanaire horses, a gesture of respect for his formidable adversary. In France, poets, composers, and intellectuals celebrated him as a revolutionary hero, and his induction into the French Academy of Sciences underscored his multifaceted genius. Picture this: a French occupation of Egypt, not only opening the gates to its fabled wealth, but also granting France dominance over the Mediterranean. This wasn't just about land, it was about power, commerce, and prestige. Controlling Egypt would sever British trade routes, striking at the economic lifeblood of France's greatest rival. At the same time, it would project French influence far beyond Europe, delivering a powerful blow to the coalition of enemies arrayed against the revolution. But there was more to the plan than strategy. Egypt, often romanticized in the West as the cradle of ancient civilization, was now ruled by the Mamluks, a military caste once enslaved but now wielding power. To many in Europe, these rulers were dismissed as barbarians. Napoleon's conquest would serve a dual purpose: weaken Britain's grip on global trade and liberate Egypt by bringing revolutionary ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity to its people. In May 1798, Napoleon set sail for Egypt, eager to claim glory and reshape history. At first, his victories dazzled the world. In June, the French army crushed the Mamluks at the Battle of the Pyramids, securing Cairo and sending shockwaves across the Mediterranean. The battle showcased Napoleon's tactical brilliance, his troops decisively overwhelming a numerically superior enemy. But glory was fleeting. Just 2 months later, Admiral Horatio Nelson and the British Royal Navy destroyed the French fleet at the Battle of the Nile, stranding Napoleon's forces in Egypt. Reinforcements and supplies were cut off, and the dream of Mediterranean dominance began to crumble. Napoleon's efforts to win over the Egyptian population also faltered. Despite proclamations in Arabic pledging respect for local customs and Islam, the people viewed the French as invaders. Discontent erupted into a revolt in Cairo, further destabilizing Napoleon's grip on the region. Then came another blow. A devastating plague swept through Egypt, killing thousands, including soldiers and civilians alike. With unrest simmering and an Ottoman army marching toward Egypt, Napoleon made a bold decision. He would intercept the enemy in the harsh Sinai desert. It was a march of unimaginable hardship. Food and water were scarce, forcing soldiers to survive on camels and whatever animals they could find. Exhaustion and despair weighed heavily on the men, but Napoleon pressed on. When the French finally clashed with the Ottomans, Napoleon's forces emerged victorious, but the cost was staggering. His army, though triumphant, was battered and weakened, struggling to hold its position. By 1799, the campaign had become untenable. Facing growing challenges and seeing little hope of turning the tide, Napoleon left Egypt and returned to France, leaving his deputy in command. It was a calculated risk, but Napoleon had his sights set on bigger opportunities waiting back home. In October 1799, Napoleon arrived in Paris, abandoning his army without official permission. It was a bold gamble that could have ended in disgrace, but fortune, as always, favored the ambitious. France was on the brink of collapse, its government teetering under the weight of war, economic ruin, and political corruption. The revolutionary ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity had been tarnished by greed and inefficiency. Inflation soared, infrastructure crumbled, and trade ground to a halt. Discontent was everywhere, and whispers of rebellion or even secession echoed across the regions. France needed a savior, and Napoleon knew it. Napoleon's reputation as the revolution's military hero made him a natural choice for leadership in the eyes of the public and the army. With the help of his younger brother, Lucien Bonaparte, a skilled politician, Napoleon devised a plan to overthrow the failing government and establish a new ruling structure, the Consulate, with Napoleon at its helm. On November 9, 1799, known as 18 Brumaire according to the revolutionary calendar, Napoleon executed his plan. He marched into the Legislative Assembly's chambers where chaos erupted. Lawmakers hurled insults, accusations, and even physical threats at him, attempting to thwart the coup. But Napoleon had an ace up his sleeve, the unwavering loyalty of the army. Appealing to the soldiers stationed outside, he decried the treatment he had received. Outraged, the troops rallied to his side, escorting Napoleon and ensuring the coup's success. By the end of the day, the government had fallen, and the consulate was established. Though it included 2 other politicians, it was clear that Napoleon held true power. Napoleon wasted no time consolidating his authority. Over the next 5 years, his grip on power tightened, culminating in a dramatic moment in December 1804. In our next episode, we'll dive into Napoleon's reign, the Napoleonic Wars, and the monumental victories and devastating defeats that shaped his legacy. Inspired by this story, The Age of Nation-States, a course offered by the Academy of History and Culture, delves deeper into this transformative era. Join us as we uncover how leaders like Napoleon changed the course of history. Stay tuned, and thank you for being part of this fascinating journey through the past.